Hello, Apurva madam. Hello, Apurva madam.
हेलो जितेश सर, मैं चालू कर रही हूँ।
Yes, please.
हेलो हेलो
हाँ मैडम, begin कीजिए.
ऑडिबल हूँ मैं?
हाँ, audible है.
ओके 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 okay. Good morning, everyone. Today we have gathered here on the virtual platform of Google Meet for the webinar. Today's webinar topic is Let us C++, and the guest speaker of today's webinar is Mr. Saurav Bose. So let me tell you something about today's speaker. So Saurav is currently working as senior software engineer in research and development in Samsung R&D Institute of India. He have completed his master's degree. He have completed his bachelor's degree from Heritage Institute of Technology, Kolkata. He have completed his master's degree from Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. And from July 2018 to present date, he is working as senior software engineer in Samsung. So I can say he have enough technical knowledge on the topic which he is going to present today. So without any further delay, I would like to hand over this session to Saurav sir, and I would request him to start the webinar.
Thank you, Apurva madam, for this grand introduction. So first of all, I would like to present my PPT. Great. All right. So first of all, welcome all of you to this webinar today on Let Us C++. I'm being told that today there are about 300 plus participants who are watching this over Facebook Live, and some are here on Google Meet. So first of all, I would like to congratulate all of you who have taken the pain to join right on time for this webinar today. All throughout COVID, I had personally subscribed to a lot of webinars, but I missed most of them. So it's really good to see such an enthusiastic audience in front of me. And I'm really grateful to Apurva madam, who has given me this opportunity to present this topic to you today. Without further ado, I would like to begin today's presentation on Let Us C++. So formally, Let Us C++. Well, even before I begin, I would like to present two stories to you today. The first one is Ariane 5. So what does this talk about? The image that you see in front of you right now might look like a Diwali rocket to you, but it's not. Let me tell you what happened in this. On 4th June 1996, the maiden flight of Ariane 5 launcher, it's a rocket, was supposed to be on its launch day. On the launch day, 40 seconds after the launch, At a height of 3,700 meters, the rocket broke up and exploded. At this moment, it might sound like a mechanical failure to you. You might already be cursing the mechanical engineers and aerospace engineers right away. But let me tell you, it is not. It is a programming error, a fundamental programming error that costed $370 million and a setback of 4 years in scientific explorations. In retrospect, the error was something very fundamental. Yet even today, we all fail to focus on the fundamentals. So today, I'm going to share my journey of being in the academics to go to the industry, to writing assignments, to building real-world softwares, from error detection to error prevention, and finally, from building code to writing software. And that said, let me talk about the next story for today. This is an American football team which was there in 1963. It was a very popular football team, but it had lost a few matches. What happened was this team was assigned a new coach, and on this day, on 1996, this team was ready for its first day of training. Their coach was Vince Lombardi. He came to them on the field and told them something they had never expected. He took the football on the right hand and he told the players, "Gentlemen, this is a football." If you have already not understood, what I'm trying to point out here is we are talking about professional athletes, the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi. But yet, this coach started with something fundamental. And his fundamental, the exploration of fundamentals by going over all the basics of the game, including tackling, including dribbling, and all the basics, kicking. He kept pursuing the basics, the fundamentals, and he took that team to great heights. Under his leadership, the team became one of the daunting champions of that year. So today, as we start our webinar, these are the stories that will inspire us to listen to the topics that I'm going to share with you for the next 40-odd minutes, 50-odd minutes. So first of all, why C++? Now, C++ is one language which is the backbone of modern-day programming languages, and it is one language which is prevalent in a lot of existing real-world software. Why is it so? C++ is a language which provides low-level features, low-level language features, as well as high-level abstractions. Now, if you don't understand what I mean by that, I would like to tell you here that by low-level abstractions, I mean you can create a complete operating system out of it, as well as you can create a complete space shuttle out of it, or you can build a game out of it, game like FIFA and all. These are coded in C++, right? So that's why C++ is so prevalent. And finally, a philosophical point I would like to say here is learn once, apply forever. So once you learn C++, you may not be using C++ in the near future. That's possible. That's quite possible. Languages are evolving every day. Today, Python is prevalent everywhere. You have Scala coming up. But the basics of the language which C++ teaches us, that never dies. That stays with you forever, right? So today, I'll share a brief agenda with you. And as we do with all presentations, we'll have a getting started part where we'll discuss the basics of the language structure. We'll discuss a very important part of programming, and we'll always see everything with the eyes of C++. And we'll see software bugs. Next, we'll look at how memory access is done in C++ and how that is used in a commercial software. Of course, we are not going to see a commercial software here, but we are going to discuss the ideas that are used in a commercial software. Next, we'll see how to craft quality code. It's not enough writing a code. You also have to make 100% code quality. We'll see how to do that. And finally, it's not enough to write a software. You have to ship it. Everybody should be able to build your code. And that's how the tools, the right tools, having the right set of tools really plays an important part here. Well, so since today I promised you that I'll give you a flavor of the industry, that's what we are doing right at the start, right from the beginning. So even before we look at any code, I'm going to discuss an idea that we are going to present all throughout the seminar or the webinar, I must say. Well, So what you see in front of you right now is a diagram of a bomb in the middle, and you have two people who are one of the person is outside the circle and one is inside. So you might have already guessed by now that the bomb in the center has a blast radius of 12 meters. The person who is inside at a distance of 10 meters has to suffer damage, and the person who is outside the circle at a distance of 25 meters should not suffer damage. So this kind of application, why do you need such kind of application? It can be prevalent in a lot of games. So I decided to choose this because you might be able to immediately grasp the concept here. So if you have played PUBG, if you have played Counter-Strike, if you have played Call of Duty, or if you have just heard about the concept of bombing and people dying, you would immediately grasp this, right? So moving ahead, how do we represent this in a programming language? Of course, you have two important variables here, or important parameters here, that we need to represent. The first is the player health. The second is the distance from the bomb. And then you have the bomb damage, that is the amount of damage the bomb does once it blasts. And second, you have the damage radius, right? So speaking of which, let's have an example. Let's say the third person, who is at a distance of 6 units from the bomb center, is going to suffer a damage of 80. So that brings the person's health to 10, right? So this is the kind of concept we have to implement it in code, right? It's a very simple concept, and if you have already understood, I would like to reiterate. You just have to iterate over this array. By iteration, I mean you have to go over each and every element one by one, seeing each and every player health, or rather player distance. If the distance is less than the damage radius, you have to decrement the health of the person, right? We'll see this in code. So let's see this in code. Great. So here I have this terminal open in front of me. So I would just like to introduce you to this. This is VS Code that I'm using. This is a very handy tool that you can also use. And beneath this, you have this compilation environment in which I'm going to use G++, right? G++ is the GNU version of C++. Great. So as I told you, as I promised you, you'll have an array called player health and a player distance. And you have max players, which is 2. And then you have, you can assign the health of players, player 0 as 53, player 1 as 100. So by assignment, I mean this is the initialization step. So even before you plan to decrement the damage, you have to have the initial assignment. So whatever was shown here in this, you had this initial assignment of 78, 51, 90, 87, all these things, right? So I've just used a simple case in which there are only 2 players. Great. So now in this loop, you can see what I have done is basically, if the player distance, the ith player, if it is less than bomb radius, then the player health is decreased by the bomb damage. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just showing the health of the people. Well, that sounds very simple, and that sounds complete, but no, it's not. I would like to tell you one immediate problem that I see here, right? Okay, for those, I have also been told that there are some first year students here. So for those who are very new to C++, I would just like to introduce within, like, let's say within the next 1 minute about how a C++ code looks like. So this is a header file declaration, you can say. So what you can treat this as, if you require some kind of functionalities in your program, you need to have some keywords like this, IOStream. So IOStream means input output stream. So I'm using this because I have to print. By printing, I mean I need to show something, right? So if you want to show something to the user, you have to have this IOStream. So this guy you can treat as a black box right now. You don't need to go into the details now. When you learn the language, you'll of course do much better than this, right? You have this has defined max players. This is nothing but setting the max players value as 2. You can ignore this for now using namespace std. And then you have the main function. As the name suggests, this is definitely the main function of the program. This is the function that is the driver code. Okay, so using this code, you can using this function, you can drive the main body of the function. So that means initialization and then decrementing the player health, as I have done here, and a lot of other stuffs you will learn later, right? So just to remember, I would like to give you one point. You also always have to need, you will always need to have a main function in your code, in a C++ code, right? Well, so as I told you, now if I run this program, if I compile this program out here, I just have to write G++, PUBG, bomb, and then int, yeah. So it has compiled. In order to run it, I need to write /a.out. Right? A.out is the name of my executable. So can you see the problem already? So you see that the player health is -27. Why is that so? This is the place where industry concepts come into play right away. So you don't just write a code. You have to also review all the portions of your code and understand whether things can go wrong, right? So here, what went wrong was I'm simply subtracting the bomb damage. That is not enough. My health cannot be negative. It should be zero at the minimum, right? So here, since my player health was 53 and my bomb damage was 80, my player health was going to negative. That is certainly not something that we should do, right? So we'll see how we solve this later, but this is one problem that I would like to highlight to you right now. Great. So we have seen the basic structure of a C++ program, and we have seen how to implement this concept through a basic code, right? We will keep on improving this as we go on throughout the webinar. Now, I've already shown you a concept of bugs to you. So when I showed you that error of health going to negative, that is some mistake. That was a logical mistake on my part. But let me tell you, bugs need not be logical. I will show you some examples where it can be due to some other problems as well. I'll show you that. But here, if you have the textbook definition of a software bug, you can define it as mistakes or errors that are made in a program's source or design. Right. So what can bugs do? Bugs can cause program to crash or freeze, which results the system unusable. So if you're playing PUBG and if your health goes to negative, your program can crash or your program can render unusable. So if you are going to negative, it's an unstable thing. Human's health cannot go negative. How to handle that? You have to handle that somehow in your code, right? And if you remember the rocket example, I have not yet revealed the source of the error in that rocket example, but even then, I told you that it's a programming error that caused that rocket crash catastrophe, right? So the system can explode also. And of course, not every time what we write can lead to systems exploding. But yes, yet we should be careful about what we write. Next, bugs can cause a potential security hazard. So when you're coding systems for the banks or let's say credit card companies, what you're essentially writing can lead to hackers hacking into the system and rendering the system unusable. So if the hackers crash a credit card system, credit card server, what happens is nobody will be able to use their credit cards anymore. And that's a potential security hazard. That's one kind of potential security hazard, right? Okay, so that's all for the presentation. Now let's again move back to code. So first, I promised you that I will be solving the other problem for you, right? So let's see that first. Okay, even before I do that, let's see this see sort of a bug first. So now, yeah. All right. So this is a very simple program. You don't even have to write this anytime in your life, right? Unless you're presenting a webinar like this. So what this program does, it simply takes as input a variable a. So there's an integer variable a. It takes a as input, right? And then what it does is it compares a to 2 and it outputs whether a is 2 or not, right? So if you enter anything apart from 2, this program should say a is not 2. Otherwise, it should say a is 2, right? Don't look at the comments right now. It will reveal the suspense to you. Well, so now here I'm going to compile this for you. Okay, so now let me enter something else. 6. Output is a is 2. That's definitely wrong. Now let's again input something else. 9. A is again 2. Now let's say input 2. Of course, A is 2. Well, now again, there's a problem. There's a bug in the software. How to handle this? And what can I do in C++ to prevent this? That is more important, because human errors are not going to die. Humans are going to be careless till eternity. But somehow the language has to be designed in such a way such that your code remains robust despite of a human error. So now here, if I just point you to the error directly, you'll see that there's a problem here. What I've done here is I've just written A equal to 2. What is A equal to 2? So if you already, okay, now you can read the comments here. So A equal to B checks whether A is equal to B, right? These are for people who are new to C++. So this is called the equal operator, right? It checks whether this is a conditional operator, which checks whether two variables are equal. This is an assignment operator. Equals, one equal is a assignment operator. So what it means is the value of B gets assigned to A. So now this is the ideal case that should have been done. I should be checking whether A equals 2, but I have not done that, right? Instead, what I have done by mistake, of course, is A equal to 2, right? Which assigns the value of 2 to the variable A, and that creates a problem. Why this creates a problem? So what this evaluates to is, so A equals 2 means A becomes 2, right? So basically this if statement that you see here becomes if 2, right? And now I would say a fancy thing with C++ is anything you put here which is not 0 evaluates to true. Okay, sorry, evaluates to true. So anything that you put here which is not 0 evaluates to true. And so what essentially happens is this becomes if true. Of course, true is of course true, right? So now what happens is, therefore, this if construct is executed. And let me remind you, this happened due to a simple human error, which could have been avoided. How? So what programming design you usually do here is you write this like this. You write 2 equal to A. Now how this helps us? If you just forget the equal to here, now if you try to compile this, you would immediately get a compilation error. So this is one small practice that you can start inculcating when you write if statements, and especially when you're comparing with values, to write it in the other way, right? So compilation errors are always better, because let me tell you this, that runtime errors are very difficult to debug. So now what you can do is you can correct the mistake, and then when you run this, it works as expected. Right? Now if you input 4, it says A is not 2. Right? Great. So our problem with this is solved now. Now let us look at the PUBG example again. So here, let me show you another interesting bug. Right? So here, what's happening is I had used integer, right, previously, but now I would like to show you what happens if I make this a double. Double is basically floating point. So if you want to represent numbers in points, real numbers, then you have to use double or float. So I would like to show you this example using double. So now, if you see the player health here, this is 80.000001, right? So it's almost 80, I would say, right? And again, the bomb damage is also 80, right? So what happens is, after that, what I am doing here is I am basically comparing the player health with 0, and if the player health is 0, I say that player is dead, right? So just to reiterate again, I have an initial health of all players. One is 80, other is 100. I subtract 80 from there, and if the player health becomes 0, I show that the player is dead, right? So now again, let us run this. So if I run this program again, so no player is dead. But ideally, if you work through the maths here, you can see there, this player should be dead. So 100 minus 80 would be 20, I agree. But 80.0001, which is almost 80, minus 80 should be 0, right? But that did not happen. Why? Because I'm comparing with 0.0. So you might say that I can compare with this, right? So even then, if you see, if I just execute this code, nothing happens, right? So this is another problem I would like to show you right now. This is called comparison by zero problem, right? When you are using floating points, you cannot compare with zeros. So what you have to do is you have to assume that the number you are getting is almost equal to zero. And when you say it's almost equal to zero, what it means it is almost equal to a very small number, and that very small number can be called epsilon, right? So just to reiterate the concept here, if you want to check whether a double number is zero or not, what you should essentially do is you should check whether that number is almost equal to zero. And when you say whether it's almost equal to zero, what you are essentially checking is whether that number is less than a very small number, right? So here that very small number is epsilon, so 0.0001. You can make that even smaller, right? So now if you do that, and if I compile this program now, you can see our intended output is there. Place 0 is dead. So what I'm trying to teach you is not C++. What I'm trying to teach you is how C++ takes you through the fundamentals. Fundamentals of learning about number systems, fundamentals of learning language constructs, fundamentals of how to write code. And that is what the purpose of this seminar is today. While some of these concepts might sound, for the advanced people, of course, this might sound trivial, I would like to remind you of that coach, Vince Lombardi, who started with, gentlemen, this is a football, right? So again, we'll move back to our presentation. Great. So to summarize, we have learned two important bugs. One was checking when doubles with zero, and another was how to prevent conditional overlooks, right? If you are not careful while writing the conditional operators. So these are two practices you can of course inculcate while you're writing code. And let me tell you, this is going to solve a lot of your future problems when you're trying to debug your software. Okay, so moving on, how to solve bugs. We have already done a couple of them, but let's just reiterate again. So followed standard guidelines, style guidelines. So when I say standard, of course, there is a standard. So when I say standard, you have to, if you do Google search today, you can search for Google style guide. If you search for Google style guide, you'll essentially find, and for C++, of course, you'll essentially find they'll point out instructions on how to write the language. So if you're writing C++, they'll tell you how to write if statements, how to write for loops, how to write while loops, and how to write classes, and so forth, right? So first point, follow standard style guidelines. So whatever I showed you right now was part of a style guide, right? Next, test modules separately and in unison. So whatever bugs you face in future is of course linked to some kind of human error, right? It can be a logical error, it can be a typing error, it can be anything, right? So therefore, it's very important to test your modules separately. And as we'll see sometime after some minutes, we'll see how we can test modules separately, right? Next, we should try to use as much as possible language features to catch bugs at compile time. Because I told you, compile time bugs are suitable for us. Why are they suitable? Because as soon as bugs are detected in compile time, you get a compilation error with a line number, and that is very important for our debugging, right? So you can directly go to the line number and you can correct the mistake. But that does not happen in case of runtime error. So if you have already heard about it, there are something called seg faults. We'll already see it. Actually, let's wait till then. So yeah, use language features to catch bug at compile time. That was the last point. Final, think carefully about corner cases and handle using exception handling, right? So when I say corner cases, these are the cases that you frequently tend to miss. When we are solving a complex problem, we only think about the complex problem. For example, in this case, we were solving a problem in which we had to decrement the health of an individual if they are within the bomb radius. But what we missed out was something very fundamental. It was something that you have to have the health equal to 0. What if the health goes less than 0? We have missed this in our code. So this will happen to us. This will happen. This was a simple case. So I admit that in such a simple case, it's very easy to debug right from the start. But I can also tell you that when you write complicated code, such simple things are very hard to detect at an early stage when you're writing the program, right? This will also happen with your assignments. All right. So what you can do is you can use the language features to make sure these errors are detected. We'll see how. And finally, efficient and well-structured software design, right? That is covered in the towards the end. So now let us look at this particular case, the fourth case, how to do exception handling. What could have been done better? So let me show you this code. So I told you about two concepts: have a better program design and have language features, right? So language features are, of course, with respect to C++. So now what happened in my case was I did not have this max, right? I did not tell the program that the minimum value of the health should be 0. So here, if I just add this statement, what happens is if the health goes negative, then 0 will be taken as the player health, right? But then how do I detect other things? Like, for example, right now what I have done is I've created two particular functions, set player health and set player distance. So let's look at only set player health for now. So what it does, it's very simple. It takes a player health, it takes an index and sets the health. Okay. Again, takes the array, takes the index of the array, as in which position it wants to insert the health, and finally it takes the health, right? This is very similar to what we have seen earlier. See, what we have seen earlier is it takes the index, we set the value of the array this way, right? So now we are just doing that using a function or a method, as we call it in formal language, right? So now if you go to this function, we'll see that we have taken these input arguments: health, player index, health value. So the concept is very simple. What we have done here is we have just set the health value, but you can see a lot of max statement, min statement, assert statements, right? So let me clear that for you first. So let us just remove this statement first. I'll comment this out and I'll set this, right? So here what I'm doing, player health I'm setting as 100, but I'm setting the fourth position. The player health fourth position I'm setting as 100. Okay, and let me remind you that max players are 2, but I'm trying to set the health for the fourth player. So of course this will cause a problem, right? But here I have not used any assert. So let's see what happens now. Oh, sorry, I compiled the wrong code. Okay, this is, sometimes it does weird things. It's supposed to fail, but it's not failing. Finally. Okay, so you see something like this, right? Segmentation fault, core dumped. And this is a most dreaded memory of any C++ programmer. So we'll talk more about this later, but this is a problem. So whenever you have problems in runtime, you typically get something like this. And this is very hard to debug because now you don't know what to do. You don't have any line number or whatsoever, right? So my first point here is what you should do is you should have enough assert statements in your code so that you can detect programs at run, so that you can detect errors before they happen, right? So now let's put the assert statement and see what happens. Then I'll tell you what it means. Right? Now again, we'll do the same thing. Great. So now we have some printing. So we see a.out, PUBG bomb setter, blah, blah, blah. At line number 11 in the file, in the function set player health, we see assertion player index less than max players failed and code dumped. So now I'm happy with this code dump error because I know where it dumped, where it failed, right? So let's go back to the code now. So this is line number 11 as the assertion complained. So what is an assert statement? So this is one of the key concepts of C++, and it is also there in all other languages, just to be clear on that part. So here, this assert statement, what it does, it is used to check some conditions before you do something. So for example, you're going to use the player index before using it. Sorry, you're going to use this player index for setting your health array, right? So you should know whether this player index is well within the bounds. Your bound is 2 rooms. You have only 2 players. But if you're setting a player index of, as here I have set something like 10 to the power something, that's huge, right? And of course, that memory is not available to you. And that is something wrong. Forget memory. That is something wrong. If you have 2 players, you can't set the index for the 3rd player, right? So these assert statements allow you to catch such bugs, right? So now what I have done here is I might have done some errors in my code. That is fine. Human errors are acceptable. Humans are made to make mistakes, right? But your code should be robust. That's what I told you again. So assert statement will help you do that. So if I just catch the player index and I make sure it's less than max players, then my problem is caught. And then what I can do is I can just simply check in which line that is called. So here. So now if I comment out this and I again compile this code, now I'm happy. Player 0 is dead, right? So that problem is now solved. Great. Now coming to the second line, the line number 12. So here you have seen I have written min of max health and max of blah, 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 right? So let me uncover this part first. So this says if the health value is less than 0, take 0, right? But again, the health cannot be greater than 100. If you have played any game, you would know that health is typically bounded to a value. It need not be 100. It can be 200, it can be 300. Now, let's say if your code has a bug due to which, by mistake, the health is set at infinite, or let's say 10, lots of zeros after 1, right? So 10 to the power 10 or something like that. Then you're essentially having infinite health, and that is not right. That is not something which is right, correct? So maybe in gaming it does not matter, but as I showed you in time critical system, in mission critical systems, it really matters, right? So that's why you should have a bound on that as well. So first, check whether health is less than negative, then use 0. If the output of this is greater than max, take the max, right? So again, I would like to remind you, you should have such checks in your software just to make sure you're well within the bounds. So after seeing these 2 statements, any software engineer who is taking, or rather any coder who's taking my code and studying it for the future references, they can tell that the health of any player cannot exceed the max health and cannot be lesser than 0, which is the min health, right? Great. So now that we have studied about assert statements, let us move to the next part. Yes, we have a story again, the Y2K bug. But before I talk about this bug, I must tell you that this might sound very simple and naive to you at this moment. But whenever you write a code, whatever assumptions you make, that will sound naive to you, naive to the future elements. Someone who is looking to your code in the future will think that you have made a stupid decision in the past, right? So have an open mind while you are seeing this error. Great. So Y2K bug is when the software engineers coded this kind of a system in which they had to just simply represent the year. What they did was so at that point of time, memory was costly, right? They wanted to code everything within a few bytes or a few megabytes, maybe, let's say. Okay. So now what they did, what small assumption they made was their code is not going to survive the century. So it's not going to be greater than 1999. Their code is not going to be used in 2000. So what they did, that small assumption that they made was they are going to use only the last 2 digits to represent the year. And that's why you have this Y2K bug in which their code was used even after 1999, and on 2000, a lot of systems all over the world had this problem of date, right? And while this system out here might sound like it's not affecting too much, I would like to remind you that there are some systems which are driving mission critical things, like you saw the space rocket. You have the nuclear power reactors running on the same time, the same time clocks, right? You have the servers all around the world who are running the same clock, and that's how the time is important. So yes, 1963 was represented as 63, and that created this problem. So what I would like to show here is the concept of a corner case. So corner case can break your code in many ways. If you don't think about corner cases, this is where it can take you. All right, so now we move to memory access. So this is one thing in C++ which makes you a Spider-Man. And when I tell that, I would like to remind you of what Uncle Ben told Spider-Man once. He told, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And that's how it makes you a Spider-Man. So why is it so? So C++ has two important ways to access memory, and by memory I mean RAM. Okay, for now, I mean I'm oversimplifying it, but let's assume it is RAM. Okay, so random access memory. So now there are two important concepts here: pointers and references. So C++ has both. Other languages will only support references. There might be languages which also support pointer. I am not aware of such a language, but I know C++ supports both. Great. So now you can see here, this house is addressed 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes, right? And you have this pointer which points to a memory address. So what is this pointer? It's the brain. So this person out here remembers the address of the house, right? The house can contain whatever it needs to contain. It can contain humans, it can contain pets or whatever. It can be anything, right? So basically a pointer is any variable that stores the address of another variable, right? So the another variable here is a house and the pointer is this human. Okay. So now to explain the concept of references, I would like to show you this. If you watch this movie, in this movie Judua, these are basically twins who look alike. Of course, they have different names, right? So references are just alternate name for your variable, right? The existence is uniform. So if you remember this movie in which if one of them was beaten, the other one used to get the pain. So in references also, if you assign the value to one variable, the original place also gets assigned. Okay, so I'll show this in a demo. Now the concept of seg fault or segmentation fault. So we saw some time back that there was a runtime error called segmentation fault core dumped, right? So for that, I would like to tell you, do not access what does not belong to you. So you have told there are 2 players. Don't access the 100th player. Okay, and to avoid segmentation faults, you should always declare whatever you want to use. So declare all the memory that you want to use. What do I mean by declaration? This is one declaration, integer. This is an array declaration. This is a vector declaration. This is a string declaration. This is a double array declaration, right? And finally, let's go back to the code again. Sorry. So now, for the sample code, I would like to just show you quickly. If you have this variable 1, which stores 10 as the value, and you have this reference. So reference is represented this way. Okay. So you have this reference for variable 1. If you set the value 20, this variable will also be 20. Okay. So this var1 is changed to 20 if you change this one. Okay. And to understand pointers, this is how pointers are represented. So in star ptr equal to this operator here is the address. The ampersand operator is the address. Okay. So address of var1 is stored into ptr. So now when star ptr is accessed, what it means is goes to the memory location and sets 20 as the value. So if I just quickly run this code for you, yeah, G++ sample code, yeah. Yeah, so here you can see this is the value, right? 20 is being shown. And here what you can do is, what references and pointers can help you in is, you can design functions like this. So if you have a pointer, you can easily set the value using this, and if you have a reference, you can set using this, right? So what is the benefit of using a pointer? A pointer can be used like this. If you have two variables, if you want to use the same pointer to point at different addresses, what you can do is, you can set the value, then again make the pointer point to a different variable, and again set the value, right? And that can be useful when you're iterating over the array. So in the interest of time, I won't be covering this in detail. I wanted to do a bit more detail, but I'll just move forward with the presentation. I'll share the code with you so that you can explore later. So now, why did Ariane 5 crash? So let me remind you what happened there. So double was so there was a variable that was represented as double, and double is a 64-bit representation. It can store really long numbers. And now integer or short is a 16-bit representation, and it can store numbers only up to 32767. So what the engineers did was, they casted double to short. By casting, I mean take whatever is there in double and make it fit in 16-bit. So it's like you're taking a you're taking a bucket of water and you're pouring it a 1 liter water bottle, right? So what happens there? Overflow. So that is what happened in the rocket as well. 40 seconds after the launch, there was a simple variable which was casted from double to short, and that resulted in an overflow. And that variable was a simple variable, but it was representing the flight direction. So the rocket thought that the direction has changed, so it started igniting itself, and it exploded and blasted, right? Great. So now what could have been done there is the point here I'm trying to make. So what is uncontrolled cast? When you simply take this integer and cast it into short, this will result in overflow. So if you just do this in C++, you will see that it prints -27008, right? But there's something called a reinterpret cast in C++. So when you talk of reinterpret cast, what it does is, it catches all the errors. If you're casting a double to short, the compiler will tell you, don't do this. It will result in the rocket crashing. Of course, the compiler will not tell you that, but it will tell you that this will cause an error. It results in a compilation error, right? So these are some of the casting operators in C++, and I would like to tell you, you should go back and look at all of these and check how this helps you in writing better code, right? And finally, before we wind up today's session, I would like to mention quality code, right? So when you talk about quality code, you have to talk about classes and objects. So whenever I had this code in front of me, I had written the entire code in one single file. That is not something we should do. We should always break down into multiple files. I'll just show you that. The details of which, again, you can read online, of course, but that will help you reduce the cohesion in the code. By cohesion, I mean that it will make your code simpler, right? It localizes bugs. So if your bug is in player, it has to localize to player. It should not float elsewhere, right? It implicitly enforces design constraints. So what do I mean by design constraint? I'll show you that. And it also makes your code readable. So what is a design constraint? Let's say single responsibility principle. So here in our example, there were players, there were bombs, and there was a blast, right? So now the single responsibility principle simply says every object should do its own job. So I'll show you the files quickly and we'll end up today's session. Yeah. So now here I'll show you. So there's a bomb class, right? It has damage, it has blast radius, it has these methods, and it has a player class. So it the get health, set distance, get distance, and it has a player manager. So player manager will add players, show dead players, and then you see the main function. It becomes so simple. Again, I'll share this code to you. You can look at in better detail later. So you have this player manager, you have this simulation manager. So now you can add players here. You can take the bomb here, and you can do the simulation manager dot blast, and then you can show dead players, right? So when you see this code, it becomes simpler to you, right? So if you want to detect any bug, you can go to that particular part of the file or part of the code, and then you can simply look at what is happening there. It becomes localized. So if you are only looking at show dead players, you don't need to worry about anything else on earth. You only need to check, given a player array, how do I need to make sure that if a player is dead, it should be shown dead, right? So that is what makes a good software design. And finally, just one more concept I would like to review here. So I talked about memory allocation, right? So by memory allocation, we can have multiple pointers here. Okay, it's 11:21. So Apurva madam, can I take 5 more minutes?
Yes, sir, sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is the last concept. Don't need to hurry up then, fine. So this is the last concept I would like to present to you guys, and this is one of the most important concepts here. So let's say this is a pointer, right? Double star player health, right? Okay, here, sorry, double star player health. So this is one operator called new. New is used in C++ to allocate dynamic arrays, right? So what you can do here is you can create an array using new. So player distance array is created here. So whatever we did in the previous codes, if you remember, I was doing this way, right? But now I am doing using dynamic arrays. So as soon as you start using dynamic arrays, you are already becoming a Spider-Man. You're using the powers of C++, right? But as I told you, with great power comes great responsibility. So now, are you equipped enough to take that responsibility is the next question. So let's see what happens. So here, what I have done is I've simply commented out this line where player health is initialized. So player health is an array, but this is not initialized, right? So now if I run this code, PUBG double dynamic. So now if you just run this code, and what it does is it takes the number of players as input. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention this here. Why I'm taking this dynamic array is if I have to take, so if you remember in the previous code, I had a static allocation for the memory address. I had only 2 players. But what if the players are dynamic? I mean, it can change all the time, like a lot of players are joining here and there. So I have 4. So if I set 4 as the player number, I get a segmentation fault, core dumped. Here starts the exploration in an industry code. Now I don't know what to do. Let's forget forget about whatever we have learned. So I'm going to teach you one software. It will take only 1 minute to do that. It's going to help you in in solving these kind of bugs when you end up in a segmentation fault. So first of all, what you should do is you should use C++. Yeah, the -G. Yeah, this is for the debug mode. If you do this, your code compiles in debug mode. Now, what you can do is you can use Valgrind. It's a tool available in Unix, so you can use that. So if you now run this code, this is also helpful for debugging your assignments. It's not just for industry. I have used this all my life. Oh, sorry. And then you mentioned /a.out. Yeah. So now, if I run this now, I again input 4 as the number. So now this code will run that. Valgrind will run it in its own environment. And see what you have seen here is error summary, 2 errors from 2 contexts. If you go to the details of it, you can see here use of uninitialized value of size 8 at line number 13. So quickly go to line number 13. You can see that, oh, health. So now health. So let's go to set player health. So what is set player health? You see player health. Oh my God, set player health. So player health is not initialized. You do that. Great. So that is solved. So now if you go back and run this code again, /a.out. So now you do. Now see. Now you can see the correct outputs. Okay. So now how could this have been avoided is that is this commented code. I have already told you this concept. I'm just reiterating it. You assign null pointer to all the pointers, right? So again, this concept might sound little difficult to absorb at this moment, but yeah, as with 1 hour presentations, this is the problem. You can look at it in more detail later. And then inside the functions, what you do is you set some assert statements. So have this practice of allocating null pointer to every variable that you instantiate, every pointer that you instantiate. So as soon as you do this, you set null pointer and you do this. And then what happens is inside this, it is caught if the pointer is not null. So now again, let me comment out this. Sorry, not this. Comment out the new statement, right? So now if I comment out this, and if I run this, see, now you have assertion, this failed, code dumped. So now I know, okay, this is the place that the problem happened. So now I can go back and again uncomment this, and then my code works as expected, right? That I've already showed you, need not show that again. Great. So finally, I don't think I have any more slides. Okay, this is a 19th slide. Okay, so just I like to reiterate. So split code into multiple source and header files and beautify. So for beautifying your code, you can use A-style. I have provided the link. You can look at it later. You can unit test and integration test your code. You should provide API documentation for users. Of course, not needed for an assignment, but later on in your life, you'll need this. And provide UX flow. That is also not that important for now, but you can look at these details so that you can write your code accordingly, right? And use cross compilation tools for easy portability. So I have, in the interest of time, I can't cover that right now, but I have already included a CMake file. So all this presentation, you have seen that I was using this kind of a command to compile my code, right? But this is not something you can do all the while. Like if you're shipping your code and you tell someone, hey, install Ubuntu and write this command, nobody will take your software. So what you should do is you should provide a setup file. You have seen in multiple softwares, it is provided. So that's why this CMake file is something that helps you accumulate all your code and build it into a executable. So this is the CMake file that helps you do that, right? So you can just write which are the source file you should take. So main.cpp, player manager.cpp, and blah, blah, blah. And then you can add a executable. So that executable is shown as PUBG here. So I will just run it. Yeah, that's it. So if you want to see it running, so if you just do CMake ... it will create something. You can just tell them do CMake ... my code will compile. It will do something here. And finally, when this is done, yeah, then you do make, and this is built. Great. And then we can do /PUBG, right? Player 0 is dead. And that's what we have lived on all the webinars. So player 0 is finally dead, and the presentation is finally over. That's it. So this is about CMake. I told you already, and that's your summary. We can review that later. Thank you very much for attending the seminar. You can ask any questions if you have.
Thank you so much, Saurav sir. And some of the students have the questions, so
Yeah,
they
sure.
will ask you one by one.
Sure, sure.
Yes, sir. Good morning. I have a question. What is the use of volatile keyword in C++?
Okay, so volatile keyword is basically used when you are trying to do multi-threaded programming. That is the primary use of volatile keyword. So I would suggest, I typically don't use that generally in my code, but if you want to at all use it, I would always go ask you to read up about these kind of variables, lock variables. Okay, so volatile keyword is basically used to have locks on the variable. So you can have multiple threads coming into a variable, and if you want that variable to change atomically, that's what you should do when you use C++. So I would ask you to look at locks and try to use that when you are writing C++ code. All right.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
So one more student have questions. She have messaged me. What is the difference between shallow copy and deep copy?
Okay, that is an interesting question here. So if you remember, one second. If you remember this code, okay, it's not sharing. One second. Yeah. So if you remember this code that I showed you, I had some references here, right? So imagine what I'm doing here is int var2 equal to var1. So what happens here is the entire content is copied. Entire content is copied here, right? Yes. And what happens here is only the name is changed. So not changed actually, it's given a new name. So var1 can also be called ref now. So this is a very oversimplified case, but I would like to tell you that whenever you are using references, it's a shallow copy. Okay, but when you are doing a complete copy of the object, it is a clone, it's a complete new variable or an object, then it's called a deep copy. This is especially relevant when you're talking about classes and objects. With integer variables, it's not that relevant, but with classes and objects, there are multiple integers there. For example, if you have this player object that I showed you, where is the code? Yeah, if you have this player class, so player class has two doubles in it, right? So now if you have a copy of player, you have all the parameters that are you should copy all the parameters. But if you just have a reference, you refer to the same player. So you refer to the player one with two names. One can be player one, other one can be Sam, for example. Okay, yeah, that's my answer for it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next, anyone have question?
Yes, sir. My question, good morning, sir. My question is, what is mutable storage class specifier?
Mutable, okay, so again, this is about multi-threading. So I don't want to go into the details of it. So first of all, are you aware of multi-threading?
Yes, sir. It means
Yeah, no, I'm not
manipulables.
asking. In that case, I'll share the answer. So yeah, mutable, it's basically asked, it's a request to the compiler to tell the compiler that this is the variable that is going to change. It's a mutable variable, right? So that is just a storage, as you told already, it's a storage class specifier. So integer is also a storage class specifier. So if you write mutable int, for example, again, I'm oversimplifying it. So if you have a random class, or let's say p player, as in my case, it's not known to C++. So now if you want to specify some properties of that class, you use these kind of storage classifiers, right? So mutable is one such storage classifier which tells the C++ compiler that this is a class that can change in between, right? So there are some, so if you have done Python programming, you can think of some classes which do not change. For example, string. In Python, you cannot change a string. In C++, you can simply allocate a character array, you can go to the index and change it, right? But in Python, you can't do that because it's unmutable. So that is my answer again. So mutable is something that is allowed to change.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Tell me.
My question is, what is external storage specifier?
External storage specifier, what exactly are you referring to? So for example, mutable is a storage specifier. So I don't understand your question exactly. So okay, let me tell you, how have you come across this question here?
एक्चुअली मैं ना ऑनलाइन C++ और उसके प्रोग्राम्स पे ना थोड़ा पढ़ती रहती हूँ और ट्राई करती हूँ, तो उसमें मुझे एक प्रोग्राम में मिला था एक्सटर्नल स्टोरेज स्पेसिफायर, तो मुझे वो कुछ समझ नहीं आया.
Okay,
मैं चाहती हूँ प्लीज मुझे वो एक्सप्लेन कीजिए.
I understand. Okay, so I know about storage specifiers, as I told you, but external storage specifiers specifically, I don't know what you are referring to. But again, I would like to just reiterate the previous question. Storage specifiers are basically, okay, let me give an example of a storage specifier that you can use. Let's say register. If you have heard about storage specifier, register basically is a storage specifier that is given as a request to the compiler to store that variable in the register. You know a register, it's a CPU memory, right? So in the CPU, you have caches, you have L1, L2 caches, you have register, you have RAM, and you have the entire swap space, right? So similarly, register is one keyword that it tells the compiler, please accept this request and store this variable as a register. Why you do that? You typically do that when you need to run, let's say, so let's say there's a loop variable that runs all the time, like in every iteration is going to run, it's going to update, right? So if you keep that in the physical memory, by physical memory I mean, let's say, your hard disk, it will not be kept in hard disk, but it can be kept as a page. For this you need to have the concept of memory, but your entire software is composed of a lot of memories, and swap is one particular memory, and so it is organized as pages. So it has to come to the RAM to ultimately execute. So the problem with RAM is it's not as fast as the cache, and the problem with cache is it's not as fast as register. So what you can do is, for the variables which keep updating frequently, you can mention the compiler, please keep it as a register variable. This is going to be executed frequently. But let me specify this here. all these kind of requests are only requests to the compiler. It's not a specification. Like, you cannot force the compiler to take that. The compiler will automatically decide to keep some variables in some storage classes, right? I don't know if I have answered your question correctly, because I don't understand what you're exactly asking. But this is a kind of storage specifier we typically use in programming languages. But these days, I must tell you, compilers are intelligent enough to automatically assign storage specifiers. These days, you don't need to, if you are using C++ 17 or even modern ones, you won't need to typically assign storage specifiers, right?
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I think we are done with the questions here. Thank you so much, Saurav, for such an amazing webinar. And being a subject teacher, I have also learned many new things from today's session. So I will definitely reteach these things again to the students. And I just hope that they will also become successful coder like you. So I'd like to thank, first of all, I'd like to thank my HOD ma'am, Mrs. Poonam Faldu, for always encouraging us for conducting such webinars. I would also like to thank the head of our institute, Professor Jatin Vaidya sir, for giving me the opportunity to conduct the webinar. And lastly, thank you so much, Saurav sir, for conducting such an amazing webinar. So I hope all students have gained a lot of knowledge after your webinar. So thank you so much, sir. And I'd like to wind up the webinar session here. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay, webinar is over. You can leave.